Evening, folks. Pull up a seat, rest your boots a spell. Joe Rivers here, host of Voices of Justice, ready to share another whisper from the windswept pages of the American West. Tonight, our trail takes us to the high, lonesome plains of the Wyoming Territory, sometime in the late 1870s, maybe a touch later. The iron horse was screaming across the prairies then, stitching the country together with steel thread. And along those threads, towns popped up like mushrooms after a rain. Raw, ambitious, hopeful, and often dangerous places, teeming with folks looking for a fresh start. Or maybe just a place to outrun their past. It was a time of vast distances, not just across the land, but sometimes between hearts looking for connection. Mail order brides. Now, there's a chapter of the West often told in hushed tones or romantic whispers. Women taking a gamble, traveling thousands of miles based on letters and maybe a faded photograph, hoping for security, a home, partnership. Men reaching out from their lonely ranches or dusty town lots, hoping for companionship, a family, someone to share the burdens and the small joys. It was a leap of faith, pure and simple, launched into the unknown. Tonight, we meet one such bride, stepping off the dusty platform in a brand new railhead town called Bitter Creek, a place living up to its name in more ways than one. She looked the part, all right, modest dress buttoned high, eyes cast down but missing nothing, clutching a well-worn Bible to her chest like a shield against the harsh Wyoming wind and the even harsher realities of frontier life. Abigail Foster, her name was supposed to be, seemed like just another soul, searching for a foothold, ready to start building a life with the lonely rancher who'd sent for her, Mr. Jacob Kane. But folks, appearances out west could shimmer and shift like heat haze on the alkali flats. This particular bride, Miss Abigail Foster, she carried her Bible for comfort, yes, but packed away careful-like in the bottom of her sturdy trunk, nestled amongst the linens, the lace, and the hopes for a new beginning. Well now, she also carried a few sticks of dynamite. Stay close, friends, as we unravel the story of a woman who arrived in Bitter Creek seemingly seeking marriage, but carrying the means, and maybe the motive, for a whole different, far more explosive kind of union. The train, a great, smoke-belching iron beast that still seemed alien against the vast Wyoming sky, wheezed to a reluctant halt, spewing steam and cinders that momentarily thickened the already gritty air of Bitter Creek. Abigail Foster stood poised at the top of the railcar steps, one hand gripping the smooth, worn leather of her Bible, the other clutching a small, sturdy handbag containing her meager savings and the packet of letters, hopeful, earnest letters from Mr. Jacob Kane. She took a slow, deliberate breath, inhaling the unique perfume of a raw frontier town. Coal smoke, horse manure, sun-baked dust, cheap whiskey from the nearby saloon already doing brisk business, and underlying it all, the clean, sharp scent of sagebrush carried on a wind that never seemed to rest. Then, holding her head high beneath a modest, practical bonnet, she descended onto the rough-hewn planks of the platform. Bitter Creek sprawled before her, less a town and more an encampment striving for permanence. A wide, rutted street, perpetually veiled in dust, served as its spine. Along it stood a collection of structures in various stages of completion. A few solid-looking false-fronted buildings housing the saloon, a mercantile, and a land office, interspersed with numerous canvas tents, hastily erected shacks of raw lumber, and the skeletal frames of future businesses. The raw energy of the place was palpable, a chaotic thrum of construction, commerce, and transient lives colliding. Men vastly outnumbered women, their faces turned towards her as she stood momentarily alone, curious, appraising, some openly leering. Cowboys and dusty chaps, burly railroad workers wiping sweat from their brows, hopeful prospectors with picks slung over their shoulders, gamblers with watchful eyes, all part of the restless tide washing westward. Abigail met their gazes briefly, her expression carefully neutral, revealing neither fear nor invitation, before lowering her eyes demurely. A burly baggage handler wrestled her trunk, heavy, iron-banded, and clearly built for arduous travel, onto the platform with a resounding thud. Abigail kept it in her peripheral vision. Inside, beneath layers of carefully folded calico dresses, sensible undergarments, linens, starter pots and pans, and a few cherished keepsakes from a life now irrevocably behind her, lay the true catalyst for this journey. Several thick, paper-wrapped sticks of dynamite, a small tin of volatile blasting caps, and coils of fuse cord, all packed with meticulous care learned from a desperate time and a desperate teacher. A man detached himself from the small knot of onlookers near the station agent's shed, walking towards her with a hesitant stride that seemed at odds with his tall, capable frame. He fit the faded photograph Jacob Kane had enclosed in his third letter. Lean, perhaps late 30s, maybe early 40s, with sun-crinkled blue eyes that looked steady and honest under the wide brim of a dusty, sweat-stained Stetson. His face was deeply tanned, weathered by the relentless Wyoming elements, yet marked by unexpected lines of kindness around his eyes and mouth. He looked strong, self-reliant, but carried an aura of loneliness, a quiet weariness that resonated with something deep inside Abigail herself. "Miss Foster? Abigail?" he asked, his voice rougher than his letters, carrying the timbre of outdoor living, yet surprisingly gentle. He swept his hat off respectfully, revealing thick brown hair, bleached lighter by the sun. "I reckon you made it all right. I'm Jacob Kane. Welcome. Welcome to Bitter Creek." "Mr. Kane," Abigail replied, forcing a small, polite smile she'd practiced in the cracked mirror of the train compartment. She extended her gloved hand, noting the calluses on his as his fingers closed around hers briefly. His grip was firm, work-roughened, but not crushing. Reassuring. He seemed decent, entirely decent. A sharp, unwelcome pang of guilt twisted inside her, a fleeting premonition of the collateral damage her true purpose might inflict. She ruthlessly suppressed it. She had a mission, born of grief and fury, that left no room for sentiment or second thoughts. "It is indeed a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Your letters painted a vivid picture, though perhaps not quite capturing the vigor of the town." "No, ma'am, reckon they didn't," Jacob admitted, a faint flush rising on his sun-browned neck. He seemed genuinely nervous, shifting his weight, turning his hat brim in his hands. Clearly a man more comfortable with horses and cattle than with courting rituals or greeting mail-order brides. "Hope the journey wasn't too hard on you. It's a long way from, Pennsylvania, you said?" "It was long, Mr. Kane," but uneventful, Abigail replied, carefully omitting the fact that her journey hadn't started in Pennsylvania, but rather in a series of less reputable locations further west where she'd been gathering information and resources. She gestured towards her luggage. That trunk holds everything I own now. Jacob eyed the heavy trunk. Looks sturdy, he commented, then seemed to realize the inadequacy of the remark. I mean, glad it made it safe. He hefted it himself, the muscles in his arms bunching, surprising her again with the strength concealed in his lean frame. Got the wagon waitin' right over here. The Bar K, my place. It ain't much to look at yet, Miss Foster. Still getting started, really. Struggling some, truth be told. But the land, it's good land. Grass holds up mostly. Hard work, to be sure, but honest work. He led her towards a sturdy buckboard wagon hitched to a pair of patient-looking mules. He helped her up onto the high seat with awkward courtesy, then carefully maneuvered the heavy trunk into the back, securing it with rope. He climbed up beside her, clicked the reins, and the wagon lurched forward, leaving the noisy platform behind. As they drove through the main street and out towards the open plains surrounding Bitter Creek, a silence fell between them, not entirely uncomfortable, but laden with unspoken questions and the weight of their mutual gamble. Jacob, perhaps sensing her appraisal of the raw town, began pointing out landmarks, his voice regaining some confidence as he spoke of familiar territory. That there's the land office, he said, nodding towards a low-slung log building with Territorial Land Agent and Cattlemen's Association painted crudely above the door. Run by Mr. Coulter, Elias Coulter, pretty much runs the association too. Catherine felt a jolt, a cold wave washing over her despite the afternoon heat, but kept her expression placidly interested. Elias Coulter. The name struck her like a physical blow, confirming her deepest fears and solidifying her resolve. So, he hadn't even bothered to change his first name out here. Arrogant, or perhaps feeling untouchable in this remote corner of the world. Mr. Coulter seems influential, she remarked carefully. Jacob grunted, a sound that held little warmth. You could say that. Built the mercantile over yonder, he gestured to the largest, most solid-looking stone structure in town. Holds the mortgage on half the businesses. Seems like. Owns the big spread north of here, the Double C. Got the best water rights, too. He fell silent for a moment, his gaze distant, troubled. Right, influential. He pointed out other features. The blacksmith shop ringing with hammer blows. The site where folks hope to build a proper schoolhouse someday. The distant thread of Bitter Creek itself glinting under the sun. He spoke of the land with a quiet passion, describing the challenges, the brutal winters that could bury fences and starve cattle, the constant need for rain in this semi-arid country, the back-breaking labor required to carve a living from the unforgiving soil. He spoke less of himself, revealing his past only in vague terms. Came west after the war. Worked various jobs before saving enough to file on his homestead claim 3 years ago. He seemed a man defined more by his present struggle and future hopes than by his history. A stark contrast to Catherine, who felt chained to her past, driven by it. They arrived at the Bar K ranch house as the sun began its fiery descent towards the jagged, distant mountains, painting the vast sky in harsh, beautiful strokes of orange, purple, and blood red. The house was small, compact, built of sturdy cottonwood logs chinked tightly against the wind. Smoke curled welcomingly from a stone chimney. It was undeniably basic, Spartan even in its furnishings, but it was spotlessly clean, orderly, reflecting a sense of pride and ownership, however humble. A small fenced garden showed signs of careful tending, though the plants looked thirsty. A few chickens scratched in the dust near a solid-looking barn. It felt real, earned. Jacob led her inside, his awkwardness returning as he showed her the main room. A large stone fireplace dominating one wall, a rough but sturdy table, and chairs he'd likely built himself. Open shelves holding a few treasured books alongside tin plates and basic provisions. Smells like biscuits, he noted with faint surprise. Martha Gable, from the store, must have sent her boy over while I was in town. She worries I don't eat proper. He showed Catherine the small, adjacent room that would be hers. A narrow bed with a clean mattress ticking. A small washstand with a pitcher and basin. A single window looking out onto the endless plains. It ain't fancy, Miss Foster, he apologized again, turning his dusty Stetson nervously in his hands. Nothing like you must be used to back east. But it's solid built, warm in winter, mostly. He cleared his throat. I hope you find it acceptable. Well, until we decide. He trailed off, flushing again. It's more than acceptable, Mr. Kane, Catherine said, her voice softer than she intended. She looked around the simple, honest room, then met his earnest, hopeful gaze. It seems like a place a person could truly build a life. A peaceful life. For a fleeting, dangerous moment, she allowed herself to imagine it, setting aside the dynamite, the vengeance, embracing the quiet rhythms of this place, sharing the hardships and hopes with this decent, lonely man. The yearning for such simplicity, such peace, was a physical ache. But then the image of Elias Coulter's confident stride, his name emblazoned on the town's power structures, intruded, cold and sharp. Coulter thrived on destroying peaceful lives. No, she couldn't forget why she was here. The path to peace, for her, lay through justice, or perhaps just retribution. Over the ensuing weeks, Catherine slipped into the persona of Abigail Foster, prospective bride, with practiced ease. She learned the rhythms of the small ranch, cooking meals for Jacob on the cast-iron stove, keeping the compact house tidy, patching his worn denim trousers and flannel shirts. She learned to milk the single cow, feed the chickens, tend the struggling garden, her hands growing rougher, her face gaining a touch of color from the relentless Wyoming sun. She attended the sporadic Sunday services held by a traveling Methodist preacher in the town's one-room schoolhouse, sitting quietly, her Bible open on her lap, offering gentle smiles to the handful of other women present. She listened more than she spoke, gathering impressions, piecing together the social fabric of Bitter Creek and the surrounding ranches. She played her part convincingly, earning the cautious approval of Martha Gable and the few neighboring ranch wives she encountered. She was seen as quiet, respectable, hard-working. Exactly what a lonely rancher like Jacob Kane would hope for in a mail-order bride. Jacob, it seemed, was utterly charmed and perhaps a little bewildered by his good fortune. He treated her with a consistent, almost courtly respect, his initial awkwardness slowly giving way to a shy, burgeoning affection. He worked tirelessly, from before sunrise until well after dusk, fighting a constant battle against the dry conditions and the limitations of his small spread. His quiet determination was evident in every fence post he laboriously set, every irrigation ditch he painstakingly dug to coax the dwindling flow of Bitter Creek onto his thirsty hayfield. He rarely spoke directly of the pressure he was under from his powerful neighbor, Elias Coulter, but Abigail saw the signs accumulating like storm clouds on the horizon. She saw the worry lines deepening around his blue eyes, the way his gaze would linger on the northern boundary line he shared with Coulter's sprawling double C holdings, the quiet frustration tightening his jaw when he returned from another fruitless trip, trying to negotiate water usage or secure fair prices for his few calves at Coulter's mercantile. Coulter, Jacob finally admitted one evening, the name torn from him after a particularly discouraging day. They sat in the main room after supper, the only light coming from the flickering flames in the hearth. Jacob stared into the fire, turning his empty coffee cup over and over in his calloused hands. He put in a new diversion dam upstream a few months back, higher up than the old one. Claims it's just for improving his own irrigation, all legal with the Territorial Water Board he helped set up. But it feels like he's deliberately strangling the creek right when I need it most. He sighed, a sound heavy with weariness. Just enough water gets through for me to barely keep the garden alive and the stock watered. Forget irrigating the hay meadow proper. Isn't there anything the law can do? Abigail asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral, though anger simmered beneath the surface on Jacob's behalf and on her own. Surely, taking water needed downstream isn't right. Jacob gave a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. The law? Abigail, in Bitter Creek and this whole valley, Coulter is the law, near enough. He runs the Cattlemen's Association, chairs the water board, owns the mercantile, where nearly everyone, myself included, carries debt on account. The territorial marshal, bless his infrequent visits, just sees a prosperous businessman investing in the territory. Coulter wraps everything up neat and tidy with deeds and permits, but everyone who ain't blinded by his payroll knows he's squeezing the little guys out, methodically, one by one, picking up land and water rights for pennies on the dollar when folks go bust or get discouraged enough to sell cheap. He finally looked up, meeting her eyes across the small table, his expression filled with a mixture of resolve and apology. He's made offers to buy me out. Low offers. Insulting, really. Says I'm bound to fail anyway. Might as well cut my losses. He paused, his gaze softening. But don't you worry none about it, Abigail. I ain't giving up the Bar K. This piece of land, it's the first thing that's ever felt truly mine. I'll make it work. Somehow. His quiet resilience, his stubborn refusal to be broken by Coulter's calculated pressure, resonated deeply within Catherine. This man, Jacob Kane, embodied the very qualities Coulter despised and sought to crush: honesty, perseverance, integrity. He deserved better than to be ground down by the same man who had destroyed her own family. He deserved the simple, peaceful life he was fighting so hard to build. And Coulter deserved justice. The kind of justice that didn't arrive wearing a badge or relying on easily manipulated laws, but came unexpectedly, delivered with the force of long-simmering retribution. Catherine intensified her own quiet reconnaissance, using her role as the unassuming prospective bride to perfection. During trips to town for supplies, while Jacob dealt with fretful merchants or tried to haggle over feed prices at Coulter's Mercantile, where the clerks treated him with barely concealed condescension, she observed. Her seemingly shy, downcast eyes missed little. She noted the comings and goings at Coulter's land office, the sturdy construction of the building, the location of the large modern safe clearly visible through the front window. She listened intently to the casual gossip in the general store, storing away details about Coulter's operations, the names and habits of his hired hands, a rough crew led by a burly foreman named Larson, known for his quick temper and unquestioning loyalty to Coulter, the layout of his upstream ranch headquarters, and the precise location of the controversial new diversion dam. She walked along the creek bed on Jacob's property, noting the drastically reduced flow compared to the volume visible further upstream, beyond Coulter's influence. She did it all with an air of quiet piety and maidenly modesty, blending into the background, easily overlooked, easily dismissed by men focused on business, whiskey, or survival. One bright, windy afternoon, while supposedly gathering wildflowers along the creek bank near the northern edge of Jacob's property, she deliberately allowed herself to stray across the poorly marked boundary line onto Double C land. It didn't take long. Two riders materialized from a copse of cottonwoods blocking her path. They were hard-faced men, wearing Double C brands on their saddlebags, their eyes cold and devoid of welcome. One was Larson, the foreman she'd heard about, thick-set and scowling. "Lost your way, ma'am?" Larson asked, his voice rough, challenging. "This here's Coulter property. Best stick to your own side." "Oh, heavens, forgive me," Catherine stammered, clutching her wilting bouquet, widening her eyes in carefully feigned confusion and fear. "I wasn't paying attention. The flowers were so lovely further up. The creek, it seems much fuller here." "It's Mr. Coulter's water," the other rider stated flatly, spitting tobacco juice near her feet. "He decides where it goes. You best remember that." Larson leaned forward in his saddle, his gaze intimidating. "And while you're remembering, ma'am, you might remind that rancher of yours, Kane, that Mr. Coulter expects that loan payment prompt next month. Real prompt. Wouldn't want no unpleasantness." The threat hung heavy and sharp in the wind. Catherine murmured apologies, backed away, letting them see her apparent fright as she scurried back towards Jacob's land. But inside, the encounter fueled the cold fire of her resolve. Coulter wasn't just squeezing Jacob with legal maneuvers. He was using overt intimidation, choking him financially, and literally starving his land of water. The loan, Jacob hadn't mentioned the specifics, the deadline. Another turn of the screw, tightening the noose. Coulter wasn't just trying to buy the Barquet. He was orchestrating its demise, ensuring Jacob had no choice but to surrender or be utterly ruined. Sleep offered little respite that night. The image of Jacob's increasingly weary face, the memory of Larson's threatening sneer, the ghosts of her own ruined family, they all churned within her, a toxic brew of anger, grief, and fierce, protective determination. This wasn't just about her past anymore. It was about Jacob's present, his future. She slipped out of the quiet, sleeping ranch house, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the turmoil inside her. Guided by the sliver of a moon, she made her way to the small, sturdy shed where Jacob kept his tools and spare equipment. In the back corner, beneath a pile of dusty burlap sacks, sat her heavy, iron-banded trunk. Using the small, intricate key she wore on a cord around her neck, hidden beneath her dress, she unlocked it. The hinges groaned softly in the silence. She carefully lifted the top layers, the sensible dresses, the linens meant for a marital home she might never share. The small packet of letters containing Jacob's hopeful, honest words. Her fingers finally brushed against the familiar, dangerous shapes wrapped in oilcloth at the very bottom. Dynamite, blasting caps, fuse cord. She unwrapped one smooth, heavy stick, feeling its dense, inert power, its potential for sudden, irrevocable change. This wasn't just about making Coulter pay for her family's destruction anymore, though that hunger still burned. This was about breaking his hold on this valley, on Jacob. This was about justice, frontier style. This was about survival. Her original plan had been simpler, more direct. Wait for an opportunity. Use the dynamite on Coulter's land office. His safe? Destroy his records, his ill-gotten gains, perhaps even Coulter himself, if the chance arose. But Jacob complicated everything. Destroying Coulter's office might inadvertently expose Jacob to suspicion, or worse, implicate him. And the thought of bringing that kind of ruin down on him was now unbearable. No, the target had to be cleaner, more symbolic, yet devastatingly effective against Coulter's power. The dam. The diversion dam upstream was the physical manifestation of Coulter's control, the chokehold he had on Jacob and potentially others. Removing it wouldn't just restore the water, it would restore hope, restore balance. It would cripple Coulter's primary weapon without directly destroying the town infrastructure or necessarily implicating Jacob. It was riskier in execution, requiring stealth, precision, and a long, dangerous journey onto Coulter's heavily guarded land. But it felt right, cleaner, a blow against the source of the oppression, not just its architect. Catherine Vance, hiding beneath the guise of Abigail Foster, mail-order bride, made her choice. The Bible she kept by her bedside offered prayers for guidance and solace, but the dynamite hidden in her trunk, the dynamite offered a more tangible, more immediate form of deliverance. The fuse was lit, metaphorically speaking. The countdown to Coulter's reckoning had begun. Catherine knew that meticulous planning was crucial. Sabotaging Coulter's dam wasn't like setting a charge in a mine shaft. Precision was needed to breach it effectively without causing a catastrophic, uncontrolled flood that could endanger downstream settlements or Jacob's own ranch. She needed to weaken it, cripple its ability to divert the bulk of the water, let Bitter Creek reclaim its natural course. She spent hours mentally reviewing the lessons from the old miner, visualizing fuse lengths, charge placements, the principles of directed force. Her cover story, checking the Crimson Pass Trail for Martha Gable's delayed medicine shipment, provided the necessary window of opportunity. She packed with deliberate care, ensuring the dynamite sticks, caps, and fuse were wrapped tightly in oilcloth, padded with spare clothes, and buried deep within her saddlebags, beneath food, water, a bedroll, and her ever-present Bible. To anyone casually inspecting her gear, she was simply a woman undertaking a slightly adventurous but plausible errand. She said her goodbyes to Jacob early the next morning, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "Be careful out there, Abigail," he said, his blue eyes filled with genuine concern. "Stick to the main trail. Don't take chances." "I'll be fine, Jacob," she reassured him, touching his arm briefly. "I'll send word from the pass if I find anything." The deception tasted bitter, but necessary. She rode north out of the Bar K, making sure anyone watching from Bitter Creek or neighboring ranches saw her heading towards Crimson Pass. The morning sun felt warm on her back, the sky a vast, aching blue. It was beautiful country, she realized with a pang, wide open, full of harsh grandeur. A land worth fighting for. A life like Jacob's worth protecting. Once she was well out of sight, concealed by the rolling foothills, she cut sharply southwest, beginning the wide, circuitous loop that would bring her towards Coulter's upstream holdings from the less patrolled western approach. She rode cautiously, keeping to low ground, using draws and creek beds for cover, constantly scanning the horizon for riders. It was slow, nerve-wracking work. By late afternoon, navigating by the sun and the distinctive shape of Sentinel Peak, she estimated she was nearing the canyon that housed the dam. The air grew cooler as she gained elevation, the scent of pine stronger. She found a secluded, narrow ravine choked with aspen and willow, offering good cover and browse for her horse. She tethered the mare securely, took a long drink from her canteen, and ate a dry biscuit, her stomach churning with nervous anticipation. Then, taking only a small pouch containing the dynamite, caps, fuse, her knife, and a coil of rope, she began the final approach on foot. The canyon rim was steep, rocky. She moved slowly, testing each foothold, mindful of dislodging loose stones. Finally, peering through a screen of juniper, she saw it below. The dam. It was an impressive structure, a solid wall of expertly fitted rock and heavy timber, stretching across the narrowest point of the canyon, water pooled deep and still behind it. The diverted channel, full and flowing strongly towards Coulter's main ranch, snaked away to the north. Below the dam, Bitter Creek was reduced to a relative trickle, winding sadly through the canyon floor. The guard shack stood near the northern abutment, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. 2 horses were tethered outside, confirming the presence of 2 guards. She settled down to wait, hidden amongst the rocks, observing the guards' routine as dusk deepened into full night. The vast Wyoming sky filled with an impossible number of stars, cold and distant. One guard eventually emerged from the shack, stretched, walked a short perimeter around the dam, then returned inside, presumably for the night shift. The other remained inside, the glow of a lamp visible through the single window. They seemed complacent, secure in their isolation. Hours crawled by. Catherine fought fatigue, her senses strained, listening to the night sounds, the whisper of wind through the pines, the faint murmur of the diminished creek below, the distant yip of a coyote. Finally, well after midnight, when the moon had set and the darkness was deepest, she judged it time to move. She secured the rope to a sturdy pine trunk and began her descent down the steep canyon wall, moving with painstaking care, praying the guards remained inside. Reaching the canyon floor, near the base of the dam, felt like entering another world, damp, cool, filled with the sound of trickling water and the immense silent pressure of the structure looming above her. She moved into the deep shadows at its base, the rough-hewn timbers cool and damp beneath her fingers. Now came the critical part. Working swiftly but methodically by feel and the faint starlight, she located the key structural points she'd identified. Joints where main timbers met bedrock, areas where the rock fill seemed less consolidated. She carefully placed the dynamite charges, wedging them securely into crevices, mindful of the water seepage. Handling the blasting caps required absolute concentration. Her fingers surprisingly steady, despite the tremor of adrenaline coursing through her. She cut the fuses to calculated lengths, long enough to allow her escape back up the canyon wall, but not so long as to invite discovery before detonation. Each placement, each connection, was checked and double-checked. Failure wasn't an option. She was placing the final charge near the southern abutment, the side furthest from the guard shack, when she heard it. Not a boot on gravel this time, but a soft whicker from upstream, near where the water pooled behind the dam. She froze instantly, melting back against the cold, wet timbers. Had a guard come out? Was it a patrol from Coulter's ranch? She waited, heart pounding, straining to hear over the gurgle of the creek. Silence. Then another soft nicker, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of a horse carefully picking its way down a narrow trail on the other side of the canyon, the side leading towards Jacob Kane's property. Terror, cold and sharp, seized her. Jacob. It couldn't be anyone else approaching from that direction at this hour. What in God's name was he doing here? Had he somehow tracked her? Did he suspect her errand? Or was this a rendezvous? The horrifying thought that he might be involved with Coulter resurfaced with sickening force. Her carefully constructed plan, her moral justifications, her burgeoning feelings for him, all threatened to implode. She heard the horse reach the canyon floor upstream, heard the soft creak of saddle leather as someone dismounted. Footsteps approached the edge of the pooled water behind the dam. Catherine pressed herself impossibly flatter against the timbers, scarcely daring to breathe, hidden in the absolute darkness beneath the dam's overhang. A figure appeared at the water's edge, silhouetted against the star-dusted sky. Tall, lean, wearing a familiar Stetson. Jacob. He stood there for a long time, simply staring out at the dark, impounded water, his posture conveying a sense of deep weariness and frustration. He wasn't meeting anyone. He wasn't checking Coulter's structure. He was just looking, bearing witness to the source of his slow ruin. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt, dipped his hand into the water held captive by Coulter's dam, and brought it to his lips as if tasting the stolen lifeblood of his land. He stayed kneeling for another moment, head bowed, then slowly rose, turned, and walked back to his horse, mounting with the heavy movements of a profoundly discouraged man. He guided the horse back up the faint trail he'd descended, disappearing over the canyon rim, heading back towards the Bar K, completely unaware of Catherine's presence, or the lit fuses she was about to ignite. Relief washed over Catherine, so potent it left her weak-kneed, immediately followed by a fresh wave of guilt. He wasn't complicit. He was desperate, driven out here in the dead of night simply to confront the physical reality of Coulter's stranglehold. Seeing him there, so vulnerable, so close to the charges she was about to detonate, it almost broke her resolve. But it also strengthened it. He needed this water. He deserved this chance. Coulter had driven him to this midnight despair. Coulter would pay the price. Steeling herself, she moved quickly along the base of the dam, touching the small flame from a carefully shielded match to the end of each fuse. One by one, they sputtered to life, tiny red eyes glowing in the darkness, eating steadily towards the dynamite. No time left. She scrambled back towards the rope she'd left dangling down the canyon wall. Hauling herself up, hand over hand, was exhausting, terrifying work in the darkness, her muscles screaming in protest. She glanced back just once, seeing the multiple fuses burning down, closer, closer. She reached the canyon rim, collapsing onto the rocky ground, gasping for breath. She fumbled with the rope, untying it, coiling it quickly. Just as she finished, the first explosion ripped through the night. A deep, powerful boom that echoed like the wrath of God, followed instantly by two more in rapid succession. The ground shuddered beneath her. She saw a flash of light from the canyon below, heard the unmistakable roar of a massive surge of water suddenly unleashed. Then came the sound of shouting from the guard shack, the sharp crack of a rifle fired in alarm into the air. It was done. She didn't wait to assess the damage further. She ran to her horse, swung into the saddle, and spurred the animal away from the canyon rim, riding hard north, back towards the Crimson Pass Trail, back towards her alibi. Behind her, the liberated waters of Bitter Creek surged downstream, carrying potential salvation for Jacob Kane and certain furious retribution from Elias Coulter. Catherine Vance, alias Abigail Foster, had struck her blow. The consequences were yet to come. Catherine rode like the devil himself, was on her heels, pushing her mare through the pre-dawn darkness, driven by adrenaline and the echoing thunder of the explosions. She covered miles quickly, rejoining the main trail towards Crimson Pass well before sunrise, deliberately choosing rougher sections to ensure her horse looked appropriately trail-worn and lathered. She spent the morning making a show of searching the pass area, even asking a lone prospector heading down if he'd seen any sign of a delayed freight wagon. By mid-afternoon, weary but maintaining her facade of frustrated diligence, she turned back towards Bitter Creek. The atmosphere in town was electric. Knots of anxious men gathered outside the saloon and Coulter's Mercantile, speaking in low, urgent tones. Horses were lathered, riders coming and going. As Catherine rode slowly down the main street towards the Barquet turnoff, she saw Elias Coulter standing on the porch of his land office, face like granite, giving sharp orders to his foreman Larson and several other hard-faced riders. Coulter's eyes swept over her as she passed, cold and calculating, but held no specific accusation yet. He didn't know. Not for certain. When she arrived back at the Barquet, Jacob met her in the yard, his face a study in bewildered joy. "Abigail, you're back! You won't believe it." He grabbed her hands as she dismounted, his usual reserve gone. "The creek, it's running high and strong. Came down like a flash flood late last night. took out some of my lower fencing near the bank. But heavens, the water! It filled the ditches, soaked the fields. It's like the heart started beating again. Catherine allowed herself a genuine smile, sharing his relief, though laced with her own secret knowledge. That's wonderful news, Jacob. Truly wonderful. What happened? Nobody knows for sure, Jacob said, shaking his head in amazement. Word from town is Coulter's big diversion dam, up north, gave way somehow during the night. Just broke. Coulter's fit to be tied, blaming shoddy construction, threatening lawsuits. But Abigail, he lowered his voice, wonder in his eyes. It feels like more than that. Like the land itself finally shrugged him off. Like justice. Justice. The word hung in the air. Catherine felt a surge of fierce satisfaction, quickly tempered by caution. Perhaps the mountain decided Mr. Coulter had taken enough, she murmured. Their hopeful moment was shattered by the pounding arrival of riders. Coulter, Larson, Deputy Cletus looking profoundly uncomfortable, and two more double C hard cases thundered into the yard, surrounding them. Coulter swung down from his horse, his face contorted with fury, bypassing Jacob entirely and striding directly towards Catherine. "All right, Miss Foster," Coulter spat, his voice shaking with rage. "The games are over. My dam didn't give way. It was blown, sabotaged, and it happened right after you rode out on your little errand." Jacob stepped protectively in front of Catherine. "Coulter, get off my land. You have no right accusing Abigail. She was miles away, was she?" Coulter sneered, shoving Jacob aside. He grabbed Catherine's arm, his fingers biting into her flesh. "My men found tracks near the blast site. Small prints. And something else." He nodded to Larson, who produced a small object from his pocket. A single, distinctive mother-of-pearl button, identical to those on the cuffs of the dress Catherine had worn on her ride. Found this snagged on a bush, not 50 yards from where the dynamite went off. Fancy button for a wild place like that. Matches your traveling dress, don't it? Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. A careless mistake. A single, damning piece of evidence. That proves nothing, Jacob protested hotly, trying to intervene again. But Coulter's men roughly blocked his path. "Oh, I think it proves enough," Coulter said, his eyes boring into Catherine's. "Enough for Deputy Cletus here to hold you on suspicion while we find more. Like maybe some leftover dynamite?" He nodded towards Catherine's trunk, still sitting in the back of Jacob's nearby wagon where it had been left after her return. "Larson, check the lady's luggage. Thoroughly." Larson grinned maliciously and moved towards the wagon. Catherine knew it was over. The dynamite, the caps, the fuse. They were still there. Proof positive. Prison awaited, or worse, Coulter might not even bother with the law. "No!" Jacob yelled, lunging towards the wagon, trying to stop Larson. One of Coulter's men slammed a pistol butt against the side of Jacob's head. He crumpled to the ground, groaning. Seeing Jacob fall, something inside Catherine snapped. The years of planning, the careful facade, the internal conflict, it all burned away, leaving only cold, righteous fury. Coulter had hurt her family, tried to ruin Jacob, and now assaulted him before her eyes. No more hiding. "Get away from that trunk, Larson!" Catherine's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, utterly unlike the meek Miss Foster. Larson paused, surprised by her tone. Coulter turned, startled. Catherine took a step back, her hand moving subtly towards the small Derringer pistol she always kept concealed in a hidden pocket of her skirt, another tool acquired during her long quest. "You want dynamite, Coulter?" she said, her voice low and dangerous, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made even Coulter take an involuntary step back. "You want to know who blew your precious dam?" She pulled the small pistol, leveling it steadily not at Coulter, but at the trunk in the wagon bed. "I did," she declared, her voice ringing with defiance. "I blew your dam, and if your man there takes one more step towards that trunk, I'll blow that too, along with your wagon and maybe anyone standing too close." The air crackled with tension. Coulter stared, momentarily stunned by her transformation, by the small, deadly pistol aimed not at him, but at the potential bomb in the wagon. Deputy Cletus looked terrified. Larson froze, unsure. Jacob, groaning, pushed himself halfway up, staring at Catherine in disbelief. You wouldn't," Coulter finally stammered, unnerved by the wild, determined look in her eyes. That's madness." "Is it?" Catherine retorted, her gaze unwavering. "What's madness, Coulter? Fighting back against a thief who destroys lives and hides behind lawyers and bought-off deputies? Or maybe it's remembering a man named Vance in Pennsylvania, whose mill you stole, whose life you ruined, whose daughters you left destitute?" Coulter recoiled as if physically struck, his face paling dramatically. Recognition and fear dawned in his eyes. "Vance? Catherine Vance? You can't be." "Oh, but I am," Catherine said, her voice trembling slightly with the force of her long-suppressed rage. "I am Catherine Vance, and I came here for a reckoning. Blowing your dam was just the beginning." She kept the Derringer aimed squarely at the trunk. "Now, you have a choice. You walk away. You tear up Jacob Kane's loan papers right now. You leave him and his water rights alone, permanently, or we see just how much providence fits inside one traveling trunk." Coulter stared at her, then at the trunk, then at his men, then at the terrified deputy. He saw the utter resolve in Catherine's eyes. He knew dynamite. He knew what even a few sticks could do at close range. And he knew, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he was facing someone with absolutely nothing left to lose. Someone whose grievance was deep, personal, and potentially explosive. The power dynamic in the dusty ranch yard had just shifted, violently and irrevocably. Elias Coulter, a man accustomed to wielding power through intimidation, wealth, and manipulated law, found himself staring down the barrel of a desperate woman's resolve, backed by the terrifying potential energy packed in her trunk. He looked at Catherine Vance, no longer the demure Abigail Foster, and saw not a helpless victim, but the embodiment of a past he thought long buried, returned with explosive vengeance. He saw the small, steady Derringer aimed not at him, but at the trunk. A threat, perhaps even more potent, promising chaos and mutual destruction. He saw his foreman Larson frozen, his hired guns uncertain, and Deputy Cletus looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. He saw Jacob Kane pushing himself painfully to his feet, staring at Catherine with a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning admiration. "You're bluffing," Coulter managed, trying to regain control, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Catherine replied, her voice dangerously calm. After 15 years of waiting, tracking you, planning this, do you truly think I wouldn't? What do I have to lose now, Elias? You took everything else. She shifted the pistol slightly, ensuring everyone saw her finger tighten almost imperceptibly on the trigger. The loan papers, Coulter. Now, or Larson opens that trunk, and we all meet our maker right here in this dusty yard. Larson took a hasty step back from the wagon. The other hired guns exchanged nervous glances. Deputy Cletus swallowed hard, his hand hovering near his own holstered weapon, though he looked utterly unwilling to draw it. Jacob stepped forward, despite the throbbing pain in his head. Catherine, Abigail, don't, he pleaded, understanding dawning in his eyes. Not just about the dynamite, but about the depth of her deception, the pain driving her. It's not worth it. Staying silent while men like him destroy lives isn't worth it either, Jacob, Catherine countered, her eyes never leaving Coulter. He needs to pay, one way or another. Coulter, sweating now despite the dry air, seemed to deflate. He saw no way out that didn't involve potentially lethal consequences. His arrogance, his power, felt suddenly fragile against this woman's focused fury. All right, he conceded, his voice raspy. All right, Cletus, get the damn papers from my office saddlebag. Deputy. Cletus, visibly relieved to have a task that didn't involve gunfire or explosions, scurried to obey, fumbling in Coulter's saddlebag and producing a folded sheaf of documents. Bring them here, Catherine commanded. Cletus approached hesitantly, holding them out. Jacob, Catherine said, her eyes still locked on Coulter. Take them. Make sure they're the right ones. The loan agreement for the Bar K. Jacob took the papers, his hands trembling slightly as he unfolded them, scanning the contents. He looked up, nodding slowly. This is it. The note. Tear it up, Catherine ordered. Jacob hesitated, looking at her, then at the papers that represented his potential ruin. With sudden decisiveness, he ripped the documents in half, then again, letting the pieces flutter to the dusty ground. Now, Catherine continued, her voice like ice, the derringer still unwavering. You ride out of here, Coulter. You and your men. You leave Bitter Creek. You relinquish your claims on the Water Board, the Cattlemen's Association. You sell your holdings, fairly, to folks like Jacob, or others you've cheated. And if I ever see your face in this territory again. She left the threat hanging, more potent for being unspoken. Coulter stared at her, his face a mask of impotent rage. His empire, built on intimidation and greed, was crumbling before his eyes, undone by a woman he'd dismissed and the ghosts of his own past. He knew she meant it. He knew he'd lost. You'll regret this, Vance, he spat. I've regretted letting you live for 15 years, Coulter, Catherine replied coldly. Now get out. Without another word, Coulter turned, strode stiffly to his horse, and mounted. He glared at Jacob, then at Catherine, a look of pure venom in his eyes. Then he motioned sharply to his men. Larson, the hired guns, and a thoroughly cowed Deputy Cletus mounted up, avoiding eye contact with Catherine or Jacob. They rode out of the Bar K yard, defeated and humiliated, leaving the torn loan papers scattered in the dust. Only when they were distant figures on the horizon did Catherine finally lower the derringer, her hand shaking now that the confrontation was over. The tension drained out of her, leaving her feeling weak and incredibly weary. Jacob rushed to her side, taking the small pistol gently from her grasp. "Catherine," he began, his voice thick with emotion, confusion, and concern. "Abigail, who, who are you?" She looked up at him, the years of deception falling away, leaving her exposed, vulnerable. "My name is Catherine Vance," she said softly. "Elias Coulter destroyed my family years ago. I came here. I came here for him." She gestured towards the trunk, the dynamite. It was meant for his office, his safe. Blowing the dam. That was for you, Jacob, to give you a chance. Jacob stared at her, processing the enormity of her story, her actions, her sacrifice, her deception. He saw the pain in her eyes, the strength, the desperation that had driven her. He looked at his fields, already greener from the restored creek flow. He looked at the torn pieces of the loan agreement in the dust. He looked back at the woman standing before him, a woman who had risked everything, who had carried vengeance in her heart, but ultimately acted for justice, for him. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out, not in anger or accusation, but with gentle understanding, and touched her cheek. "Catherine Vance," he said softly, trying the name out. "You brought the rain." The dust settled in the Bar K yard, leaving behind not victory or defeat in the traditional sense, but a fragile, complicated understanding forged in hardship, deception, and unexpected courage. Catherine, she decided to reclaim her true name now, confess the rest of her story to Jacob, the years of planning, the acquisition of the dynamite, the burden of her assumed identity. Jacob listened patiently, his initial shock giving way to a quiet empathy. He understood loss, understood desperation, understood the lengths people could be driven to when justice failed them. He didn't condone her methods, the inherent danger of the dynamite, but he couldn't condemn the woman who had saved his ranch, perhaps his future, from Coulter's grasp. In the following weeks, Bitter Creek adjusted to the new reality. Coulter, true to his forced promise, or perhaps just eager to escape the shadow of Catherine Vance, liquidated his holdings quickly and vanished from the territory. His departure left a power vacuum, but also an opportunity for the smaller ranchers and businesses to breathe, to cooperate rather than compete under duress. The water flowed freely down Bitter Creek, and life, while still hard, felt more hopeful. Jacob, freed from the crippling loan and with adequate water, threw himself into revitalizing the Bar K, his natural optimism returning. Catherine remained at the ranch, helping Jacob, the initial awkwardness between them slowly evolving into a quiet partnership built on shared experience and mutual respect. The question of her future, and theirs, hung unspoken in the air. The dynamite remained locked in the trunk, a silent reminder of the path she had almost taken, the vengeance she had ultimately tempered with a different kind of justice. One evening, sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky, Jacob finally asked, "What about the dynamite, Catherine? What will you do with it?" Catherine looked out at the peaceful plains, so different from the landscape of her grief. "I don't know, Jacob," she admitted honestly. Maybe, maybe some things are best left buried, like anger, like vengeance that consumes you. She paused, or maybe a small smile touched her lips. It might come in handy for clearing stumps or digging wells. Properly, Jacob chuckled, a warm, easy sound. Reckon it might at that. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers closing gently around hers. Whatever you decide, Catherine Vance, you belong here now. If you want to. Catherine looked at their joined hands, then into his steady blue eyes. She saw not a pawn in her game, but a partner. She saw a future not built on the ashes of the past, but on the possibility of a shared, honest life. It wasn't the ending she had planned when she packed dynamite in her trunk, but perhaps, she thought, it was the beginning she truly needed. Sound of gentle, reflective harmonica music begins to swell softly under Joe Rivers' voice. Joe Rivers, Catherine Vance, came to Bitter Creek as Abigail Foster, a mail-order bride carrying a Bible in her hand and dynamite in her trunk. Quite a combination, wouldn't you say? She was driven by ghosts, by the righteous fire of vengeance against Elias Coulter, the man who destroyed her family. Her plan was born of grief and desperation, a plan to deliver justice with an explosive force. But life out west, like life anywhere, has a way of complicating even the most focused missions. She found Jacob Kane, the man she intended to use as cover, wasn't just a pawn. He was decent, hard-working, trapped in Coulter's web himself. And Catherine, she found that the line between vengeance and justice can get blurry. She found that protecting someone else's future might be more powerful than simply avenging her own past. She used her dangerous tools not just for destruction, but for liberation, freeing the water, freeing Jacob from Coulter's stranglehold. And in that final confrontation, she chose not widespread ruin, but a targeted strike against Coulter's power, using the threat of her hidden power and the revelation of his own past sins to dismantle his empire. It wasn't the fiery end she might have once envisioned, but perhaps a more profound victory. Her story reminds us that people are rarely just one thing. Catherine wasn't just the vengeful daughter or the meek mail-order bride. She was both, and more. She carried darkness, yes, but she chose to act for the light when it mattered most. It speaks to the power of unexpected connections, how empathy can change even the most hardened heart, how sometimes the bravest act isn't blowing things up, but choosing how and why you fight. It asks us to look beyond appearances, beyond the Bibles or the dynamite people carry, and see the complex human being within, capable of great destruction, but also profound courage and change. What hidden strengths, what unexpected complexities lie within you? How do you choose to wield the power you possess? If Catherine's story, this tale of vengeance turned to justice, resonated with you, please share it. Let these voices carry. And be sure to subscribe to Voices of Justice for more stories of the surprising paths people walked on the American frontier. Until next time, this is Joe Rivers, reminding you that sometimes the most powerful changes come not from the loudest explosion, but from the quiet shift within the human heart. Keep listening for the voices, 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 for the voices,